Hey guys, what's up? We're back with some, I want to say WarFrame action, but it's not exactly WarFrame action. So, I was watching this video called 107 Facts You Should Know About WarFrame, and I just noticed that there were a handful of errors, mistakes, bits and pieces that I wanted to make note of. So, that's really what we're going to be doing in this video. I'm not, like, having a dig at this video. This is a pretty well-made video. It's just that since this was released on December 17th, 2017, there are a couple of things that are wrong, outdated, bits and pieces. And you know that this is a video that they intended to make of a more relevant time period, because they do make mention of the Plains of Eidolon, so that's what we're talking about, as well as Hydroid Prime. So, like, that's kind of the time period that this video was definitely produced in, and I think there were a few things that needed to be made aware of. So, let's go.
Hey guys, what's going on? I'm Brendan with the leaderboard, and today we're here to check out Digital Extreme's darling
In the interest of time, I'm just going to skip through the introduction. Let's go.
Play. It was developed for PC, Xbox One, and PlayStation 4. Sorry, Nintendo fans. The WarFrame
RIP Nintendo.
Nexus app is available in Google Play for mobile users. It allows players to check inventory for future missions, use blueprints to create or claim items, see new events, and collect extractors. WarFrame's story takes place in a dystopia centuries after a technocyte virus was released, which led to the near genocide of humans. Now,
It also led to the near genocide of the Orokin, I think. Something like that.
the world is controlled by 4 divided factions made up of corrupt clones, humans, monsters, and aliens. Respectively, these camps are the Grineer, the Corpus, the Infest.
They use Infested Alavi as a symbol of the Infested, but I personally would have gone with an Infested Ancient.
And the Sentients. Prior to its launch, WarFrame was known as Dark Sector. Then, Dark Sector branched off conceptually and became a completely different game. Nonetheless, Digital Extreme Studios never abandoned the initial concept, and decided to change the name of the project to disguise its previous rejection from publishers. The first WarFrame we are introduced to in the game is Excalibur. He is also the main character from the 2008 video game Dark Sector.
Not exactly. Excalibur is his own thing. The character from Dark Sector is different, I think.
In Dark Sector, Special Agent Hayden Tenno contracted the technocyte virus during the Cold War and was the first human able to withstand the force of the WarFrame without combusting.
The way that they word this makes it sound like Dark Sector is a prequel to WarFrame. It is not. I just wanted to make it very clear that WarFrame and Dark Sector are two totally different entities. One is not the prequel of the other.
In the game, when an item is referred to as Prime, whether it's a weapon, a Warframe, accessory, or a Sentinel, it means that it is a purely preserved artifact from the Orokin era. It is a rare and powerful object with superior abilities.
Actually, superior stats. Currently, the abilities haven't changed. That might be a thing with Umbra, we're not 100% sure, but all Primes only have superior stats compared to their non-Prime versions.
In order to find Prime items, players must obtain a Void Key in order to enter the
Void Key. Now there's a relic of a bygone age. We actually use relics, and we don't actually go into Orokin Towers most of the time. We actually go and fight enemies in Fisher missions, which will produce the reactor required to crack open a relic, and that is how you get Prime parts.
Orokin Void, which is comprised of 2 towers and protected by the Corrupted. Here the
Void is not necessarily comprised of 2 towers. The Void may very well be comprised of a countless number of towers, and they all have different defense systems and such.
player must collect the Prime parts and blueprints, which they can combine in the foundry of their ship to create Prime items. In 1993, Digital Extreme Studios partnered with Epic Games to create the one-player shooter series Unreal. Unreal sparked their passion project, WarFrame, which was an attempt to retain an intense action multiplayer shooter with fully fleshed out characters. Digital Extreme Studios came up with the initial WarFrame concept in 2000. Little did they know it would take 13 years of development before it launched in 2013.
When it launched in 2013, it was an open beta. I think that the community generally agrees that they launched when they also launched on PS4. So around 2014, I think it was. Yeah. So yeah.
Even though WarFrame launched on March 18th, 2013, it was made available to players as a closed beta a year before it was completely finished. The gameplay was entirely different, and the developers tweaked it until they were satisfied with it. The term WarFrame comes from Boeing Aircraft's experimentation with exo-armor. Steve Sinclair stumbled upon the term while researching World War II. Sinclair's space ninjas were inspired by Metal Gear Solid, Akira, Cowboy Bebop, and Guyver. In a 2000 interview with Canadian magazine GG8, creative director James Schmaltz described his initial vision for the setting of WarFrame as a paranoid universe where all players have a bounty on their heads. Digital Extremes sought to create a multiplayer platform where players could either unite or divide. In this way, users could either co-op an invasion or propose death matches, player versus player.
Player versus player actually exists in the form of the Conclave.
In its early stages, the creators wanted death to have serious repercussions. For instance, if a player died, they'd suffer the consequence of being looted by other players.
I've played this game since open beta in 2013, and I am fairly certain that this system has never existed. It might have existed during closed beta, but it definitely didn't exist in open beta.
While WarFrame was on hiatus, Digital Extremes did work for hire on other projects like BioShock and Darkness 2. However, they were not content working under other larger companies. While WarFrame was not their first independent project, it was their first successful project as an independent company. WarFrame's success enabled them to work on future projects without any interference from what Sinclair called, quote, the publisher beast. On a deadline to present their concept to the Game Developers Conference, Digital Extremes had its first prototype model made within a month. Creative director James Schmaltz wanted to reach out to some of the most powerful creators of free-to-play games for publication, but no one offered to financially back the project. Other free-to-play developers warned Digital Extremes that too much of a focus on graphics and not enough focus on updates would lead to their demise. It was thanks to this advice that WarFrame is one of the most updated and popular games. The development phase officially started in February 2012. There were only 8 developers at that time, and they called the game Project Lotus. The team eventually grew to more than 170 workers. Unfortunately, since publishers rejected WarFrame, Digital Extremes resorted to laying off 48 of its employees. Luckily, with the rise of WarFrame, some of those employees were rehired. Sinclair knew that if they
There's also an article online about the development of WarFrame and how DE had to had to let go of a ton of employees during that period of time during WarFrame's development where everything was kind of going down-ish. So it's a fascinating story, and I suggest looking around for it. I want to say it's a Forbes article, but I'm not 100% sure. Just have a look around. It's an entire article about the development of WarFrame right from the start all the way to at least open beta.
they wanted to make WarFrame, it would have to be on the company's own dime. In fact, the team wanted to make it on their own dime so they wouldn't be beholden to a publisher. They also wanted to be solely responsible for the game's success or failure. When Sinclair first came up with the idea to publish and develop WarFrame, he noticed a trend starting to take the gaming world by storm: free-to-play. The only hesitation Sinclair had was actually agreeing to go free-to-play, since he knew the studio only had one shot to win fans over with the core game, and bring in new players with updates. With a free-to-play structure, there is no incentive to use real money to actually be better in the game.
In other words, no pay-to-win mechanics.
Instead, it's a combination of two factors. One, do you want to complete things faster? Two, how cool do you want to look while completing things?
That's known as fashion frame. So if you're new to the game and you see people talking about fashion frame, that's what we're talking about.
Community producer Rebecca Ford felt that from the get-go, the game gave players a lot of options, which led to players deciding how they wanted to spend their time and not feel limited in how they approached their objectives. After researching players, Ford noticed that players tend to balance both farming with progressing towards objectives. Ford has also checked the stats of the game's ecosystem to ensure that the game's loot felt unfarmable.
To ensure that the loot felt unfarmable. That is a demonstrably incorrect statement. Rebecca has probably checked the stats of the game in order to make sure that the loot is farmable. I think you may have misspoken there. Anyway, just wanted to make sure that the developers of this game have actually done a very good job of making sure that loot is farmable to some extent. Looking at you, Hema. Looking at you, Cybia, looking at you, well, I was looking at you, Magus Husk, but they actually fixed Magus Husk so it doesn't cost a ton of chaotic. But for the most part, DE does do its best to make sure that loot is farmable to some extent. Of course, right now there is this issue with the ghoul journal fragments where people have been farming for like 10 hours straight and have only gotten like 7 fragments out of like 53 or something. So hopefully they'll look into that, because that does seem a little bit harsh. But so far I think the developer response has been mostly that particular piece of loot is not, well, it's not exactly loot, so it's just lore, but also that because this is from an event that will occur at regular intervals, that this might be a bit of a long game. I don't know. Anyway, on with the show.
She noted that if it ever did get to that point, the team would address the issue and do their best to fix it.
Just wanted to say that last sentence right there is precisely why I thought that previous sentence made no sense whatsoever.
James Schmaltz, CEO of Digital Extremes, knew it would be a challenge to go free-to-play. He felt the biggest difference in going free-to-play was making sure to listen to fans and see how they reacted to updates. He resolved to continue to build on the game based on their reactions and feedback. Dennis Cawson, the lead character artist, admitted that the free-to-play structure meant the studio had to adjust their development cycle. Normally, they would release a game and that was that. But with WarFrame, the team creates a character, develops them, and releases them into the wild. Then, after feedback, makes adjustments and fixes. Technical animator Bob Piscopop noted that he embraced this cycle because something he worked on at the beginning of a week could be rolled out by the end of the week. He would check out the forums and embrace the feedback on the team's work, be it positive or negative. Because WarFrame was a surprise hit, Digital Extremes was able to turn down projects from other studios. They wanted to focus on bringing WarFrame to consoles before they tried anything else. Rebecca Ford felt that WarFrame was a sleeper hit with the community. While it consistently made the top played games in Steam, she felt the game itself had under-the-radar success overall. When WarFrame launched in 2013, it had over 3 million players signed up, and that was before the PS4 launch.
3 million registered losers.
Sinclair felt that with the launch of WarFrame on PlayStation 4, it was one of the first times that players on consoles fully embraced the free-to-play model. He knew games were expensive, and that WarFrame could be something entirely new for console players in that they wouldn't have to spend a dime to get access to it. Before the studio agreed to launch WarFrame on PS4, they asked Sony to agree to a few things. They had to self-publish the game, Sony had to support the free-to-play model, and they needed to release updates as frequently as possible. In fact, Sony approached them about bringing WarFrame to PS4, and promised them full creative control. The only thing Sony had to do was pass the patches and updates through certification. When it came time to actually develop WarFrame for the PS4, Sinclair noted that it was a painless process. The only real hurdle the team had was making sure to lock it at 1080p and have it run at 60 FPS. WarFrame was meant to be a single-player game at first. The idea to make it an MMO-like game with co-op came out of its story. The development team believed that the best stories are the stories about players themselves and how they work together. A lot of the story elements, mainly in the WarFrames themselves, used to rely on codex entries within the game. The team noticed that a lot of players never read the codex entries, so the developers decided to make cinematic trailers for all Prime WarFrame.
They also kind of made cinematic trailers for all of their new WarFrames, but those were mostly like introductory videos about like what the WarFrame does, what you can do, how you can consider modding them, etc, etc, etc. Oops.
Frames. Octavia's Anthem was one of the first quests to feel more cinematic.
I wouldn't call Octavia's Anthem one of the first quests to feel more cinematic, since Octavia was released this year actually, and one of the quests that definitely feels way more cinematic than Octavia's Anthem is The Second Dream, which was released at least 2 years ago. So to call Octavia's Anthem one of the first is a little disingenuous, I think.
Developers loved making it, but noted it took a lot of effort to complete. But ultimately, that's the direction they wanted to go in for WarFrame and its quests. WarFrame's audio director George Spanos said that WarFrame's...
With Octavia's Anthem, just a quick side note, when I thought they were talking about Octavia's Anthem being difficult to complete, I thought that was the development of Octavia's Anthem, but now I'm starting to think that maybe what the leaderboard is trying to say is that the quest itself was difficult to the quest itself required a lot of attention, a lot of effort to complete by the player. I just wanted to note that it was mostly the last mission that required a significant amount of effort to complete. The other sort of missions in the quest were more or less just stock standard missions, with some nice bits and pieces added in, like a few sentience here and there. But it was definitely that last mission of Octavius Anthem that was absolutely dope, baller ass, like awesome, cool looking, visually stunning. Well, that's what cool looking means. Visually stunning, super mega ultra thing that we could do in a Warframe quest. So I like that. But yeah.
Octavia's character and gameplay is heavily reliant on music. He said, quote, "Octavia is to be a unique Warframe that's able to play songs that the player creates." He claims that the biggest challenge was avoiding dissonance with other players in order to allow them to, quote, "jam with each other." Warframe's story was established on two main storylines, the Warframes and the Tenno. The Tenno storyline was meant to feel more fleshed out, while the Warframe story was meant to be more cryptic.
Right now, both storylines are extremely cryptic, especially what happened this week.
Warframe takes the player all across the solar system. The types of missions depend on the planet, with goals ranging from survival and capture to sabotage and so on. The Eidolons are massive monsters inspired.
Alright, first things first. Eidolon. The correct pronunciation. Jesus Christ. The correct pronunciation is Eidolon. So every time he says Eidolon, just remember Eidolon, as in Plains of Eidolon.
Inspired by kaiju giants in Japanese anime. Rebecca Ford says that developers were also influenced by the kaiju found in Guillermo del Toro's film Pacific Rim. The Corpus ship tile set was the first and only layout available in October 2012. Now the game offers procedurally generated landscapes.
Procedurally generated landscapes is not a thing that exists in the game. Yet. There may be a chance, there may be a time in a relatively distant future where DE actually goes into the landscapes and makes them procedurally generated. But until then, there are no procedurally generated landscapes. In the context of Warframe, the term landscape refers to things like the Plains of Eidolon, and future landscapes being those large open areas that we will be seeing hopefully on every planet. So procedurally generated landscapes is not a thing that exists. There are tons of procedurally generated maps though, involving different tile sets for different environments within different planets and moons and the void even. Like every mission, well, not every mission, an overwhelming majority of missions in the game are using a procedurally generated map, so that every mission will have rooms that are totally familiar, but they're connected in different ways.
Players can build clans made up of large teams of players. Together they can build obstacle courses, collect items, compete in special events, and become part of the clan leaderboards.
Just a quick note, you can also make a clan with a small number of players.
PC clans cannot be part of the console clans.
PC players can also not interact with console players in any way, shape, and form, and as far as I can tell, PS4 players cannot interact with Xbox players either.
Steve Sinclair plans to expand the dojo obstacle course so that players can customize it the way they want. Players will be able to place hazards, start and stop triggers, timing gates, target dummies, and other additions to add to the dojo obstacle course.
That's actually been talked about last week, or 2 weeks ago, in the most recent dev stream, so stay tuned for that.
Currently, Digital Extremes is experimenting with sandbox gameplay that enables players to explore their own side missions, and compensates for the lack of updates for raid missions. While trials are the
Raid missions are called trials.
main endgame for Warframe,
Also, I've just interrupted him saying trials being the main endgame for the game. That's not entirely true. Everyone in the community agrees that Fashion Frame is the real endgame of the game, and fishing is like the mid-late endgame.
Sinclair hopes to incorporate something similar within the planes. The 18 mission-based trials, according to Sinclair, would
18 mission-based trials is an inaccurate statement. There are not 18 mission-based trials. There are only 2 trials that involve a bunch of missions in between, but there's certainly not 18 missions between those 2 trials. There's 2 trials called, one of them is called the Law of Retribution, and the other one is called the Jordas Verdict. These trials work in a similar way to Destiny raids, if you've ever done a Destiny raid, or potentially a Warcraft raid, but I've never played Warcraft, so I'm not 100% sure on that one. It's, for those who don't know what I'm talking about, it's essentially a series of missions or rooms that involve different puzzles or like combat encounters, all culminating in one final large-scale boss battle that involves a bunch of special techniques, using special items that are not available in the rest of the game, or using some sort of a puzzle in order to defeat the large boss. So, for example, in Law of Retribution, you need to use the button system that exists, that you kind of had to deal with 2 missions ago, or... yeah, 2 missions ago. No, sorry, in the last mission before the whole tram and the whole Fomorian core mission, but you have to use the button system in order to make sure that you can open a door so that you can drop a charged battery. That is something that you had to deal with in the first mission in order to set a tube on fire so that eventually Vahek would be forced to come onto the ground and you can kick his ass to the curb. Much the same way in Destiny, I will refer to Crota's End, where the final boss mission involved using a sword, which was something that you had to use in the previous room in order to kill some enemies and do all sorts of weird stuff, as well as killing the sword bearers. And yeah, basically it's the same idea, a large boss battle that incorporates specific techniques and gameplay mechanics that existed only in previous rooms and or previous missions that were involved with the raid.
Would be great for other players to get a feel for, and he hopes to add more missions like that outside of the endgame. Plains of Eidolon was targeted towards veteran players. Rebecca Ford revealed that the Eidolons, monsters sent by the Sentients, can only be defeated if all narrative quests have been unlocked. The player must switch between warrior mode, obtain
When they say warrior mode, they mean warrior operator mode.
Only after the quests are completed, and WarFrame mode. Monster Hunter was a major source of inspiration for the Sentients. Sinclair wanted to capture the feel of Monster Hunter's multi-stage boss fights. The Sentients were added within the planes to address the limited endgame content available in WarFrame. The planes themselves are an entirely new playground for new content. Speaking of the planes, Sinclair felt like the planes are a perfect place to expand. He knew players would comment with "open it up," and his team has every intention of doing so. Community coordinator Megan Everett said that the development of the planes went pretty quickly considering how massive it was. She's noted that the idea for the planes began during the Q1 stage of 2017, and the team was working non-stop leading up to the July 2017 demo reveal. The team was so dedicated to making the Plains of Eidolon that Everett and other members would catch themselves yelling, "Pencils down!" to catch a break. They even made changes to the demo just hours before the big reveal at TennoCon.
I just wanted to make note that when they made a big change to the demo reveal in TennoCon, they also accidentally incorporated a bug where if Rebecca died, the entire demo would have crashed. So that's why when you're watching the TennoCon reveal of the Plains of Eidolon, that's the context of why Steve is always yelling, "Don't die, Rebecca, don't die," because then the demo would have crashed, and that would have been really awkward for what was essentially a massive reveal at TennoCon 2017.
Eidolon is a term of Greek origin, which means phantom or ghost. The planes themselves are meant to hint at what was there before, which resonates with the Greek meaning of Eidolon. Prior to this update, WarFrame was comprised of a set of missions of varying complexity. The levels themselves were linear, but randomly generated in order to keep things fresh. However, the Plains of Eidolon added an all-new mode. The team had thought about making Plains of Eidolon procedurally generated as well, but they felt that it wouldn't work well in an open world. So the team had to rework their entire game engine to make sure that everything felt authentic and unique within the Plains. While the map itself is not procedurally generated, the encounters within the Plains are. The team wanted the world itself to always feel familiar, but for players' experiences to be different. Within the early stages of developing the Plains of Eidolon, the team wanted the world to feel open. Sinclair noted that prior to the Plains, the majority of WarFrame felt like, quote, a rat in a maze. Aside from the wildlife, Plains introduced an all-new civilization as well.
Swazdula, friend.
Prior to the expansion, Sinclair felt that really the only people on the other side of the gun were enemies, and he wanted to add an actual colony to interact and trade with. The Codex Scanner enables players to scan and obtain data on enemies. It's an encyclopedia of the lore of all the characters encountered. The Helios blueprint can be built or bought to automatically scan enemies.
The Helios blueprint can be bought or built or bought in order to scan things. That is an incorrect statement. The Helios blueprint is what you use to build the Helios Sentinel. You can buy the Helios blueprint, but you haven't bought the Helios Sentinel. You have to then build the Helios Sentinel. The alternative is to go into the market and buy the Helios Sentinel as a thing. So being able to buy the Helios Sentinel being able to just buy the Helios blueprint is not enough to have a Helios Sentinel in order to be able to just automatically scan things.
Which may be harder to target. There are about 3 hotfixes or updates applied to the game per week.
Except during Christmas. They actually have a bit of a hiatus during Christmas.
During October 2012 and September 2014, there were over 279 hotfixes and updates. 2 weeks of no updates or hotfixes have proven to be disastrous for the game. In 2014, a major issue arose with the Eyes of Blight in between update 15.8.1 and 15.9, in which all the leaderboards were erased. In November 2013, when WarFrame launched on PlayStation 4, Sony's system prevented Digital Extremes from updating and hotfixing as quickly as they would have. A year later, when launching with the Xbox One, they ensured their control over updates by being cautious in the certification process. On average, the developers release a new WarFrame once every 3 months. The exceptions are the Prime variants and Frost and Nyx, which took about 100 days to launch in Update 6. The developers have made a point to feature a new weapon for every WarFrame every 14 days. They've made good on this promise for the last 4 years and counting. Developers have also made many sub-updates, including the Silver Grove, the Islands of Inaros.
It's not called the Islands of Inaros, it's actually called the Sands of Inaros. That's also the name of the quest, it's the Sands of Inaros, which you do in order to actually get Inaros.
And Spectres of the Rail in 2016. Parkour 2.0 allowed for an entirely new set of movement within the game. There were so many added techniques that an all-new tutorial was added within the game just to teach players the new moves. Parkour! With the Parkour 2.0 update, the developers integrated a vast amount of movements. Among these are the double jump, the aim glide, the bullet jump, the rocket jump, the wall jump, the melee strike.
I just wanted to say that all of these that were mentioned just now, these terms are regularly used in the WarFrame vernacular, but the next set of terms that you're about to hear, I have never heard anyone use them outside of this video.
As well as other combinations such as sprint rocket, barrel roll, drop canceling, falling bullet jump, rocket dash, rolling jump, and enemy bounce. Parkour!
I have no idea what they're talking about, that's what I mean.
One of the most notable mechanics within the game is the ability to run against walls, something not many other combat games do. It gives the game a more enhanced, dexterous feel.
That is called wall running. That's a term that's commonly used in the WarFrame vernacular.
Sweet parkour abilities wasn't enough, then the next coolest thing is adding flying space ninjas. Update 15 did just that. In Update 15, an entirely new mechanic called Archwing was
Archwing.
Introduced, which added an augmentation to your WarFrame, giving you the ability to fly in.
To call it an augmentation is a bit wrong and a bit misleading. It's actually a jetpack. You can also use this in the Plains of Eidolon. I think they've already shown some footage while they were talking about Plains of Eidolon. So, to call it an augment, not really. There are WarFrame augments that exist, but those are actually mods that you can place in your WarFrame to augment one of its abilities. For example, Mag has 4 augments. One of them works on her pool, one of them works on her magnetized, one of them works on her polarized, and another one works on her crush. The one that works on her crush roots enemies for a certain period of time. It also reduces their armor by a certain percentage. Temporarily.
In space. When the update was being made, the development team wanted the Archwing system to feel as anime-like as possible, which of course meant having a giant sword that could cut through spaceships.
The idea that having a giant sword that can cut through spaceships while you're in space being really anime-like gives me the sort of implication that they believe that it is really unrealistic, but in truth, because you are in space, you have zero gravity, which means anything of any mass weighs nothing at all. So it's perfectly possible to be it's perfectly possible to be flying around with a giant sword that doesn't weigh a thing, so you can just swing it around as if you're just swinging around a knife.
Development process for the Archwing was designed to stay true to the already established modes within WarFrame. The only difference was that you'd be fighting in space, which already made everything 1,000 times cooler. Movement within the Archwing was meant to feel familiar as well. Sinclair never wanted players to feel as though they lost their muscle memory. The majority of the movement control stayed the same, but the movement itself was adjusted for space. The team did experiment with some of the movement for Archwing, and that's a good thing they did. In testing, they noticed the ability to move up in any direction felt vomit-inducing, and could make players feel disoriented in combat. So they went with a predetermined up motion instead.
The ability to move up in any direction was later implemented for a while, but a lot of players did complain and thus confirm that being able to move up in any direction was really vomit-inducing, gave people motion sickness. So instead, right now, there is the option to turn it on and off. If you want to turn it on, you just basically have to go into your controls, your control settings in options, and just turn on experimental flight, and that will allow you to basically do barrel rolls, do a flip, fly sort of technically upside down, or if you turn it off, you're just basically flying on a standard plane. You'll be going left, right, so sort of following the map as you go along, so there's none of that sort of motion sickness, throw up right now kind of movement.
Launch, there were only 8 Warframes available: Excalibur, Mag, Vault, Loki, Ash, Ember, Rhino, and Trinity. Since launch, there have been 44 Warframes added within the game, including Prime Warframes. At this rate, it seems there's no slowing down for Digital Extremes. In terms of major updates, Warframe has seen 22 of them since launch, and each major update has included a new Warframe as well.
Not every major update has included a Warframe. The war within the Second Dream, I'm fairly certain that these updates did not involve a Warframe. What they did involve was a giant cinematic quest that's very important, lore-wise. So, I just want to amend that sentence to say, each major update has included either a Warframe, most of the time, or a massive quest.
While a bunch of Warframes have been released since launch, the developers always made sure each one had a purpose and felt balanced rather than rushing them out. Sinclair felt that combat should be freeform, and each new Warframe should allow players to expand upon and improvise on their strategies. Many of the voices for the Warframes were not provided by professional actors. George Spano thought it was more convenient to modulate the voices of studio employees. Level designer Cole Crosby is the voice of Vor, and community manager Rebecca Ford is the voice of Lotus. Megan Everett is the community coordinator who often streams on the Warframe Primetimes broadcast. She also voices the cries of the Valkyr.
And by extension, Valkyr Prime.
Warframe has a channel on Twitch that features dev streams hosted by Rebecca. The team discusses all things Warframe, from skins to upcoming features. If you missed it, you can review it on their YouTube channel, Play Warframe. Their YouTube channel, Play Warframe, has over 100 episodes, plus the primetime broadcasts. Musical composer Keith Power, recognized for his work on Age of Ultron, Criminal, and Hawaii Five-0, collaborated with Warframe's audio director George Spanos to score Warframe's digital soundtracks. There are 24 tracks in the album, which was released this July. The theme song for Warframe is called This Is What You Are. You can listen to
I wouldn't call This Is What You Are the theme song of Warframe per se, because it's not really a song that shows up until you do the Second Dream. So, is it really fair to call it the theme song of Warframe when you don't actually encounter it for 150 plus hours, according to SkillUp? I don't think that's necessarily a fair statement. I'm not sure if Warframe even has a theme song by my standards. I don't know. But I wouldn't call it the theme song of Warframe. It's definitely the theme song of Warframe post the second dream. That's a perfectly valid as a statement. But before the second dream, I wouldn't say so. I would actually even say that the sort of bongo drum introduction music that you sometimes hear when you're about to log in, that is definitely the theme song of Warframe.
To it on the WarFrame playlist in Spotify, which includes an exclusive mix of inspirations and favorite songs by the developers themselves. Though WarFrame is primarily a shooter game, it's loaded with a variety of melee weapons. In a Forbes magazine article, writer Paul Tassi praises the availability of swords, machetes, katanas, fist weapons, daggers, hammers.
Quick question. You're attempting to cite a Forbes article, but you're using a quote from 10 o'clock news. How does that work? I don't particularly understand that. Was the quote also featured in the Forbes article as well, or are we mixing up our references here? Or am I totally misunderstanding what you're trying to do here? I think I need a bit of explanation on this particular screenshot I am seeing right here.
Axes, and other weapons, made available in the third slot of Warframe, which is absent from other popular shooters, such as Destiny.
Destiny has swords. Sure, that's like not even remotely close to the amount of melee weapons that we have in Warframe, but they do have swords. Hang on, they did have swords. I'm not 100% sure if they still have swords in Destiny 2, but they did at some point have swords.
Not only that, but Warframe has an extensive modding system for each weapon and Warframe. Almost every type of customization for a weapon or arm.
Wait. Fusion cores. Just like the Void Keys, this is a relic of a bygone age. Fusion cores have actually been replaced with something called Endo. It is a resource that you just pick up from dead enemies and boxes, not loot boxes, just boxes that are lying around. And the best thing about Endo is that unlike Fusion cores, which have a set value, Endo is its own sort of like currency per se. And you know like how much Endo you need specifically to upgrade a mod from one rank to the next, or one rank up 10 ranks depending on the mod. So that's how modding has evolved, and that's basically what Fusion Core 2.0 is. It is now Endo instead of Fusion cores. Just had to make sure that any new player watching this video knows that Fusion cores, they don't exist anymore. Although I have seen some people actually randomly find a Fusion core, that's a bit weird. There is a legendary Fusion core. No, there's a legendary core, but that doesn't even have a mod anymore. Like, that's more of a thing that exists, kind of like a special version of Endo, which actually just straight up maxes a mod that you choose. So, just keep an eye on Fusion cores not ever being a thing anymore.
Armor set is possible within Warframe and could meet every type of player's needs. All of Warframe's weapons are unique despite the fact that there are hundreds upon hundreds within the game. None of the weapons are reskins or slightly different versions of another weapon. Each weapon has its own look and feel. In a 2016 interview, studio head Shelton Carter said that if he could have foreseen their success with Warframe, the team would have worked on improving the weaponry's damage system. However,
the weaponry's damage system is currently being looked into as we speak. Damage 2. I want to say 5. Sorry, damage 3.0, but it's at the moment it's not damage 3.0. I'm not 100% sure if we're going to call it damage 3.0, but that system is currently being looked at. We've just had news of the current development idea about what the impact, puncture, and slash damage types are going to do. So eventually next year we will look into how all of the elementals are going to work, so stay tuned for that.
However, their main concern is to not lose players who might have invested in mods and gear to create such weapons. Fast facts time here. There's a secret minigame available on the PC version of Warframe. If you enter the account name Flappy and the password Bird, you can play Flappy Bird. Another Easter...
I just want to make note that you can also access Flappy Bird if you own a Zephyr. Just go to your arsenal, click on your Zephyr, go to its appearance, and there should be a Z appearance, and that will allow you to play Flappy Bird immediately without hesitation.
Easter egg is Wormius, a side-scrolling minigame players can access by selecting an equipping worm and then tapping the W at the top of the screen.
This also works for Worm Prime.
There are Orican cat statues hidden in different parts of the game. They're found in the least visible places like ledges. It is unknown what their purpose is in-game, what they unlock, or how many there are. The roots of Orican are made up of two words. Oro, which is the Spanish and Latin root for the word gold, and kin, which translates to family. Put together, this symbolizes the high rank of the noble and rare Orican lifeline. When loitering on the ship, players can turn their scanner to hear an outraged security officer yelling about expired passports and threatening to shoot people. This is presumably a reference to the indie video game called Papers, Please, which players are tasked with checking identification. WarFrame has its very own fan convention, hosted by Digital Extremes, known as TennoCon. The second TennoCon was held in London, Ontario in 2017, with over 2,000 attendees who traveled from 34 different countries to experience the panels, workshops, escape room cosplay, and live Twitch stream with gameplay of Planes of Idol. The Hydroid Prime WarFrame was announced at the 2017 TennoCon art panel. Just as the name suggests, players will be able to use water as a weapon by sending its enemies down to an undersea grave. Its weapons will be the badass Ballistica Prime, which can reanimate dead enemies, and a cutlass sword, known better as Nami Skyla.
Hydroid Prime access is no longer available. We're already up to Mirage Prime access. Yeah. Like, Hydroid Prime is something that has already existed for about 3 months, I want to say? No. At least 2.5, I think. I can't remember. Anyway, Hydro Prime exists. Mirage Prime is now something that exists as well. It's the next one, so yeah.
As early as 2008, Digital Extreme Studio head Sheldon Carter had worked with comic writer Matt Hawkins to create comic art on Dark Sector and The Darkness 2. Carter has talked about the inclusion of different timelines, which he feels will add clarity to Warframe's story. In October of 2017, a comic based on the video game was released. Comic writers Matt Hawkins, known for Samaradan and The Tithe, and Ryan Cady, known for Magdalena, collaborated to, quote, explain the lore in a way that will satisfy longtime fans, as well as convert readers into players. They worked closely with Steve Sinclair in order to remain faithful to the original story. Sinclair was also involved in the process of getting the comic book series
Tenno Scoom
created and wanted to make sure it felt as authentic as possible to the Warframe world. The first issue's cover was actually drawn by a fan of Warframe, Kevin Glint, who has done a massive amount of fan art for the Warframe series.
You called him a fan, but he's also like an artist in Warframe? Anyway. That felt a little bit weird.
The illustrations for Warframe's comics are produced by Studio Hive. Stylistically, their previous comic art in Bushido, The Way of the Warrior, and the book Son of Merlin is similar to the game. The comic's 5 issues will be released as a first volume collected edition in April of next year. When asked if there would be a hidden surprise inside of the comic book collection, writer Ryan Cady revealed that there was an in-game currency coupon inside the first issue. In October of
the in-game currency is called Platinum.
2016, a couple by the names of Niti and Eli from the Xbox One clan Midgard held their wedding within Warframe because many of their loved ones were players they met while playing the game. This wedding was even approved by Digital Extremes themselves.
As you were watching the wedding footage, you may have noticed that Lotus was standing there. So, Lotus is a model that exists in the game but is only available to the Rebecca herself. So, there's no way of getting the Lotus model for any of your Warframes unless you are the Rebecca or unless you somehow hack the Rebecca's account, but otherwise that's not a thing that exists in the game.
In 2015, Warframe received an award from the MMO Reader's Choice Awards for Best Community, Best Expansion, and Favorite Action MMO. By Warframe's 4th year, the game's population grew to nearly 30 million registered players, with
30 million registered losers.
With 93,466 years worth of playtime invested. Symbiote Studios bought the rights to manufacture Warframe action figures. The CEO of Symbiote Studios, Joseph Reiter, predicts Warframe is the future of gaming. Mag, Nyx, Rhino, and Excalibur action figures can be ordered and purchased for $80 through the online store section in Warframe's.
The Mag one, I so want one, but it's so expensive.
Main site. Well, that's everything. Once again, I'm Brendan with the leaderboard. Thanks for watching 107 facts about Warframe. Are you one of those 30 million registered users?
30 million registered losers.
What's your favorite weapon mod? Comment below and let us know. Don't forget to click the bell icon to become part of the notification squad, and if you like getting more from your games, subscribe to the leaderboard, your home for video game fact.
I think I said this at the start, but if I didn't, I'll just say it again. Do subscribe to the leaderboard. They seem like a bunch of really well blokes. Not the best sentence in the world, but still. The video was pretty well done. Like I said, there was just a few... Actually, there were quite a few inaccuracies that I had to address. So, hope you guys enjoy this. If you actually like my video, click the like button. If you didn't, fair enough. Click the dislike button. Subscribe to the channel for more WarFrame action, and I guess until next time, I will see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye!